Hey everybody, welcome back to ATP, Ask the Pastor. Today, we got a question that I get at least once a year. Someone asks, "Dear Pastor, would you please explain to me the parable of the unjust steward in Luke chapter 16? The reason I say we get this question once a year is at Holy Cross, we follow what's called the historic lectionary or the ancient lectionary. It is the series of readings that have been used in the Church Catholic and the Church Universal for like a millennia and a half. And so this text, Luke 16, 1-9, is always the gospel lesson for the ninth Sunday after Trinity Sunday. And so Trinity Sunday is always the Sunday after Pentecost. And then, so 9 Sundays after that, every year we have the parable of the shrewd or unjust manager. So you're not alone in asking this. And in fact, this is probably one of, if not the most difficult of Jesus' parables to hear because it's got a big switch to it. In fact, here, let's read it here. We're in Luke chapter 16, verses 1-9. "And he said also unto his disciples, There was a certain rich man, which had a steward, and the same was accused unto him that he had wasted his goods. And he called him and said unto him, How is it that I hear this of thee? Give an account of thy stewardship, for thou mayest be no longer steward. Then the steward said within himself, What shall I do? For my Lord taketh away from me the stewardship. I cannot dig. To beg I am ashamed. I am resolved what to do, that when I am put out of the stewardship, they may receive me into their houses. So he called every one of his Lord's debtors to him, and said unto the first, How much owest thou unto my Lord? And he said, 100 measures of oil. And he said to him, Take thy bill, sit down quickly, and write 50. Then he said to another, And how much owest thou? And he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said unto him, Take thy bill, and write 80, which is 80. And the Lord commended the unjust steward, because he had done wisely. For the children of this world are in their generation wiser than the children of light. And I say unto you, Make to yourselves friends of the mammon of unrighteousness, that when ye fail, they may receive ye into everlasting habitations." So, the big switcheroo here is, you've got this scoundrel for a steward, and he's wasting his master's goods. We're not told how he's wasting the master's goods. It doesn't matter. But the master finds out about this. The rich man finds out about this and calls the steward to account for his stewardship. It's basically, you're fired, go get the ledger and hand it over to me. You're relieved of your duties. And so, on his way to get the ledger, the steward thinks to himself, what am I going to do? I'm too ashamed to beg, and quite frankly, manual labor isn't my cup of tea. So I have to find some other way of providing for myself in the future. Now, this is why then this is how the steward deals so shrewdly or so wisely. Because for so long he's been content to waste his master's goods, and he has no thought for the future whatsoever. Until panic strikes because he's losing the stewardship. At that point then, his wisdom and his shrewdness comes out because he says, now, with these final few moments that I have with the ledger, how can I provide for myself in my future? And what he does then is he takes these debts that are owed to the rich man, and he cuts them. One he cuts in half, another he cuts down by a fifth, and this does two things. The first is it makes his master look ridiculously generous to the debtors. The second thing, and the more important thing then, is that in this by doing this, he's providing for himself in the future. When these same folks, when these debtors hear, hey, he's been released from the stewardship, they'll say, let's invite him into our homes. Let's care for him because he's done us a great service by slashing the debts that we owe. Let's welcome him into our houses. Now, what you would expect from a human point of view is for Jesus to tell this parable and then castigate the guy and saying, he's a thieving, low-down scoundrel. Instead, what Jesus does is he commends the guy. But he doesn't commend him for basically stealing from the rich man. What he commends him for is his shrewdness or his wisdom in this. And so where is it here? Verse 8, the Lord commended the unjust steward because he had done wisely. For the children of this world are in their generation wiser than the children of light. So here's the point of comparison. The point of comparison isn't that you're supposed to defraud your boss by stealing a bunch of pens or paper clips or anything like that or whatever it is. You're not supposed to steal. The Lord that said thou shalt not steal is the same one who's telling this parable in Luke chapter 16. So the point of comparison for the parable is that Christ wants his disciples to mimic or to mirror his shrewdness, not with worldly things, not for the sake of worldly gain, but for the sake of spiritual and eternal things. And that is why he says then, the children of this world are in their generation wiser or shrewder than the children of light. So he wants his Christians to be shrewd with the things that they are stewards of. Now, every Christian is a steward of money, possessions, time, your positions, your vocations, whether you're a parent, a father, a mother, a child, a grandparent, an employee, an employer, a citizen, whatever it is, you have been given possessions and you have been given vocations. And Jesus' point is, since you are a steward of those things, I expect you to use those things shrewdly for the sake of others. So the point of comparison is this guy's shrewdness in how he's providing for others. So what the Lord is basically saying is, I want you to be shrewd and wise about being rich in good works, about using the things that I have given you. I have placed you as a steward over these things, and I want you to use your noggin and think about how you can best use your possessions, use your wealth, use your property, use your abilities, use your vocations, how you can best use all of these things that I have given you for the sake and benefit of your neighbor. And so he says in verse 9, and I say unto you, make to yourselves friends of the mammon of unrighteousness, that when ye fail, they may receive you into everlasting habitations. You can't take it with you, they say. And so, you're supposed to use all of these things that you've been graciously given by God to care for those around you and to be wise and shrewd in finding ways to do good works. Doing good works for others. Loving your neighbor isn't a checklist that you get to say, I've done X, Y, and Z, therefore I've loved my neighbor today. The Christian is rather to always be looking for ways that we can serve our neighbor. So think about the way that Luther talks about the Ten Commandments in his small catechism. You have the prohibition, but you also have the requirement. So he prohibits stealing, let's say in the seventh commandment, thou shalt not steal. He prohibits stealing, but he also requires that we help our neighbor preserve and protect his possessions and income. Well, the Christian's job is then to go out and find ways that we can help our neighbor preserve and protect his possessions and income. The same thing with the sixth commandment, don't commit adultery. How do we, on the other side of things, help our neighbor preserve and protect his marriage? With the fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill, how do we help our neighbor in every bodily need? With the eighth commandment, how do we help protect and build up and defend our neighbor's reputation, and so on. So the life of good works and love for neighbor isn't a cookie-cutter list that you just get to check off. The Christian is to always be shrewdly looking for ways of how can I serve my neighbor in love. And the reason they serve their neighbor is because of faith in Christ, and that's what makes those works good. Now, there's some confusion too then at the end as far as what does this mean that they will receive you into everlasting habitations or everlasting tabernacles. And what this means is, like we said a moment ago, you can't take any of your stuff or your possessions with you. However, the things that do go with you are your good works. And when you get to heaven then, there's going to be droves of people saying, hey, this person did all sorts of good works. Their faith produced all sorts of good works in their life. I was the recipient of these sorts of things. Now, I know this sounds a little strange, but I want to read to you something from Johann Gerhard, one of the most eminent theologians of the 1600s. And he wrote this in a sermon for the 9th Sunday after Trinity. He writes, "This is why we should make friends with unjust mammon, so that when we suffer want, they will receive us into the eternal dwellings. This is the principal reason for this parable of Christ, to exhort us to good deeds toward our neighbor and to see to our neighbor's welfare with our temporal goods while there is still time." Galatians 6, verse 10. "We will take none of our temporal goods with us out of this world, except for the good deeds we have done others. For on judgment day they will be publicly praised. Thus, in this time of grace, we should make friends." So, there it is, very simply. He's not telling you to steal or defraud your neighbor or your boss or anything like that. Simply what he's telling you is be rich in good works, because those are the only things that go with you. And good works can only be done by faith in Christ and his salvation then. So that's Luke chapter 16, verses 1 through 9. Thank you for that question, because that is just, like you said, one of the most difficult parables of Jesus. As always, send us your questions at atpholycross@gmail.com, and we'll answer them as soon as we're able. Until next time, See you later.